Hello from the GovCIO Media and Research Federal IT Efficiency Summit. Joining me now is David Raley, Chief Digital Business Officer of the Marine Corps Community Services. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ross.
So you and I have talked about how legacy RMF practices can routinely add too much time, 12 months, 18 months, things like that, to projects. And the money that comes with that time is also pretty big. So what are the structural reasons that ATOs fail to deliver what they promise, and why do these delays persist?
So I think there's a whole bunch of reasons. I'll probably start with like the broadest reason first. I think generally speaking in the mission owner community within the DOW, and I've seen this broader across the federal government, and also within the vendor/contractor community, there's a misunderstanding of what ATOs even are. So I'm going to circle back to that and explain that. And then it's also the most visible problem that mission owners and vendors experience. Did you get your ATO? No, I didn't get my ATO. It took. There's lots of reasons why they take longer, and much of it actually doesn't necessarily have to do with cybersecurity or the compliance process itself. There's underlying problems, which we'll talk about. Mm-hmm. So, but it is. I would describe it as the tip of the iceberg of did you get your ATO? No, I had this delay. I didn't have it. Let's talk about what an ATO actually is. So a vendor might ask, or a mission owner might ask a vendor, have you ever gotten an ATO for your application? Well, no, they're never going to get an ATO for their application ever. Why? Because you don't get ATOs for applications. You get authorizations for systems operating in a government/DOW context, right? So with that being said, understanding that you need to think about the overall system, and the system includes operational data and context, the user community, the mission set, and the underlying infrastructure and controls and everything else that the application runs in, the platform, so to speak. So I think what very often happens between that, and these are people, this is not malicious at all. This is due to a lack of understanding. Mission owners and the vendors start out on the journey together trying to get this mission-enabling application installed, up and running, and authorized. And it's almost like, and by the way, the reason I can speak about this the way that I do is I was that mission owner. I experienced this several years ago, and this is what brought me to the point of launching Operation StormBreaker and founding it, is because it's getting at this very problem. So an individual mission owner and the vendor will then be like, oh, well, we need an operating system to put this application on. Are we going to use a cloud one or not, or on-prem? It doesn't matter. All the things there. It's almost, and then they go, let's go get our ATO, and then they go to try to get the ATO, and they're like, oh, AC1 control. How are we going to implement that? Oh, I think we need an identity management solution.
And then begets other things, right?
Right, of course. And thousands, potentially, of controls or sub-controls that need to be addressed. You're self-discovering what you're missing from an operations standpoint through the ATO process, which then the ATO process starts getting the blame for you, but you didn't have the right disciplines in place to do that. So I think that's part of it. And so I would love to work on helping everyone understand we need to have these capabilities and platforms like Operation StormBreaker has, where a vast majority, 85% is the number, of the control set in the Marine Corps RMF process that is already inheritable from the platform, so that mission owners and vendors are starting pre-stage, far along the authorization process, because they can inherit controls from the actual platform. And then they can focus on, with my team, the differentiation of the controls there. So that allows us to accelerate and move past that ATO problem. But that really, I think, is why the problem is so large. And then the mission owners and vendors don't have the support they need from platform teams and the compliance side who understand the problem. They're more a gatekeeper function of get all this stuff done, and then when you're done, we'll let you through, as opposed to how do we work together to solve this problem and then advance the mission by getting the applications in those systems authorized.
So you talked about a little bit about the compliance side of things. I wanted to sort of talk about the ATO and the traditional ATO and the compliance culture, the checklist stuff.
Sure.
Like, can you kind of give a one-on-one on why that's so damaging and how it can be bridged?
So inadvertently, you're getting right at the problem that, not inadvertently, I'm sure you did unintentionally, but I can, yes, thank you, I'm sorry. But what I want to key off of is the point that I made around like this idea of yourself discovering what you need to do from an ATO process through trying to get an ATO. Then you are in this panic mode as a mission owner, as a project team trying to get the system pushed through. And then you're like, okay, well, how am I going to handle this control? How am I going to handle this control? And what you start to do is you start to try to make up reasons why you are meeting the control. Mm-hmm. And so that gets you into the dangerous world of compliance checklist approach, which is not really security. It's compliance for the sake of compliance. We wrote a statement for this control answer that called we implemented it. Did you actually truly understand what the intent of the control was and have something operationally in place to cover that control? Or are you just trying to make an argument you think the ISM and the SCA will agree to and the AO will eventually agree to? I think that's the dangerous part. So you're just doing to get through the compliance instead of understanding the spirit of what that control intends to do in order to be resilient and secure.
So this conversation about speed and security, that there is this sort of myth out there that, we got to do all this overly due diligent 12 to 18 month thing to make sure things are secure. Why does that myth persist, and how can it be sort of bridge this idea that speed and security are so interconnected?
So those are two very distinct answers. So let's unpack the first one, which is related to the myth around the time thing, and it goes back to your your previous question, which is the idea around the compliance side of things. Again, if you don't understand the mission risk and the security risk and compliant risk trade-off that you need to have, because you need to have harmony in those three areas. If you don't have harmony in all those three areas and you overly look at mission risk versus overly looking at security risk or compliance risk, and those things aren't in harmony, you're going to have an issue. So if the focus is on just compliance and how do I answer a control statement versus how do I implement the right safeguards for the application to meet the mission requirement, then that's how you get off track. I think that's part of the problem. And then the speed side of it, so I'm going to go into the DevOps world and talk about CI/CD, and in our case, the raised platform of choice designation we have with our certified DevSecOps pipeline, where all of government, because commercials moved there many years ago, should move into CI/CD and deploying in that way for a whole host of reasons, which we probably don't have time to unpack today. But from a security perspective, when you take a container and you build it in the compliant pipeline with the risk tolerances and security baked into that pipeline, you actually are seeing far deeper into the application layer on where the vulnerabilities are and things are at, and you're doing that in a 15-minute cycle instead of an 18-month cycle. So you are getting much more secure and faster. So it's provable that that's very much the case, where you can actually move through faster and be more secure when you move into that DevOps with the right kind of security guardrails and everything baked in. And that's where we should all be moving towards. We're getting a foothold in that area, but there's a lot of work left to be done to get everybody as much as possible shifted over there.
Yeah, I know that's a shift that has been part of it. I think we'll leave it at that, because I know we have a lot. We could go on for this forever. Dave, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate it.